Archaeology and the early Indian past. We turn now from texts to archaeology. Archaeology, the study of the human past, though material remains, is closely connected with history. Material remains range from vestiges of grand palaces and temples to the small, discarded products of everyday human activity such as pieces of broken pottery. They include different things such as structures, artifacts, bones, seeds, pollen, seals, coins, sculptures, and inscriptions. Historians, anthropologists, and archaeologists understand culture as something that includes all patterns of people's learned behavior, the ways of thinking and doing things that they learn from the social group of which they are a part. Archaeologists also use the word culture in a more specific, technical sort of way connected with certain other important terms: artifact, industry, and assemblage. An artifact is any portable object made or altered by human hands, example pottery, tools. Similar artifacts made of the same material found at a site comprise an industry, example a microlith industry, blade, and burin industry. All the industries found at a site form its assemblage. If similar assemblages are found at several sites, these sites are said to belong to the same archaeological culture. Material evidence is a key to understanding human behavior and experience. It is not enough to describe a stone tool or pot. The challenge is to get the stone tool or pot to tell their stories about the people who made and used them. As the products of craft traditions and part of the lifestyles of people, artifacts are rooted in specific cultural contexts. So, the narrow technical meaning of culture in archaeology can be stretched to correspond to the wider meaning mentioned earlier. The rhythms and patterns of time based on material culture are generally slower and longer than those of historical events, and archaeological cultures do not coincide with the rise and fall of dynasties or kingdoms. Field archaeology deals with the exploration and excavation of sites. Sites are places where material remains of past human activity can be identified. In the plains, in areas where mud and brick were used for making houses, archaeological sites occupied by people for a very long time are often visible as mounds. Mounds get formed over the centuries due to the rebuilding of structures and the accumulation of rubbish, wind-blown sand, and other sediments. Sites are often discovered by sheer accident. They can also be discovered by using clues in literature, by regional or village surveys, or with the help of aerial photography. Sites buried underground can be detected by simple methods like inserting metal probes or rods into the ground. There are also the more sophisticated remote sensing techniques such as Landsat imagery. Scanners of Landsat satellites create digital images of the Earth's surface and can help identify features such as ancient river courses, canals, embankments, and buried settlements. Archaeological evidence does not necessarily provide a complete picture of the material culture of ancient people. Artifacts found in the archaeological record generally consist of things that have been thrown away, lost, forgotten, hidden, or left behind, intentionally or unintentionally, by people when they moved elsewhere. Furthermore, not all material traits survive. Archaeological reconstruction depends on the amount and kind of material that is preserved, and this in turn depends on the objects themselves and on environmental factors, particularly soil and climate. Inorganic materials like stone, clay, and metal objects are most likely to survive in the archaeological record. Stone Age people must have used tools of wood and bone as well, but it is the stone tools that have survived in large numbers. Tropical regions, with heavy rains, acidic soils, warm climates, and dense vegetation are not favorable for preservation. These things have to be kept in mind when assessing archaeological evidence. Sites can get destroyed by the forces of nature, example floods, tectonic movements, volcanic eruptions, but they are more often destroyed by people when they clear land for farming or build houses, factories, roads, and dams. Sites can be explored by carefully examining what lies on the surface, or they can be excavated, i.e., dug. Sites are not excavated just to see what they contain, but rather to uncover their stratigraphic sequence. The basic principle of stratigraphy is that if there are different layers, strata, or levels at a site, the lower ones are older. Of course, if a site gets disturbed, this principle does not apply. It is very important to know the stratigraphic context of artifacts, i.e., the precise level at which they were found, and what other kinds of things were found along with them. Excavations can be horizontal, where a large surface area is exposed, or vertical, where the digging involves a small surface area, and are accompanied by careful recording, mapping, photographing, labeling, and preserving of artifacts. Recording is very important because excavation is destructive. Some features of the upper layers have to be destroyed as archaeologists move from one layer to the next. Equally important is the publication of results, otherwise no one except the excavators will know what was discovered at the site. These days, an important trend within field archaeology is to try to understand sites within their larger landscape and context. Archaeologists are also increasingly moving towards non-destructive methods of investigation, such as remote sensing and regional surveys. Regional surveys are conducted by walking over carefully selected sections of an area, observing the distribution and nature of surface features and finds. These are recorded and the surface finds collected. A great deal of valuable archaeological information can be gathered in this way. While archaeologists generally work on land, marine or underwater archaeology is a rapidly growing area of study. In most other countries, marine archaeology deals mainly with shipwrecks. But in India, there are instances of entire cities that have been submerged by the sea. Marine archaeology involves many specialists such as oceanographers, geologists, geophysicists, and diver photographers. It also requires the use of special equipment and scientific instruments. For instance, an echo-sounding system registers a rise when a boat passes over an underwater object. A side-scan electronic system gives a view of the sea floor. Underwater metal detectors held by divers give a signal if they sense any kind of metal object between 3 and 4 m away. In recent times, exciting underwater discoveries have been made off the coast of Dwarka and Bet Dwarka in Gujarat. At Dwarka, there are remains of a submerged port city, including fortification walls and stone anchors, perhaps going back to c. 1500 BCE. Late 11th to 15th centuries pottery very different from earlier periods, coarse to medium-grained red ware, glazed wares with floral designs. Structures made of broken bricks from remains of earlier periods, 4 structural sub-periods identified. Many types of iron objects including nails, arrowheads, spearheads, hoes, knife blades, etc. A stone image of Parvati and Rishabhadeva. Terracottas of poor workmanship. Bangles of glass, ivory, shell, bone, etc. A coin of Balban, 1266–87, from the Middle Level. Early 2nd century BCE late 3rd century CE pottery red ware, some with stamped designs, black on red painted pottery found in the upper levels. Houses mostly made of burnt bricks, 14 1/2 x 9 x 2 1/2 inches, squarish bricks, 11 x 11 x 4 inches, used for floors. Several house plans were reconstructed and 7 structural subphases identified. Copper objects. Iron objects including nails, an axe/adze, sickle, and pan. A fine and varied range of molded terracotta figurines, including many of the humped bull, wheels, carts, and votive tanks and a fine headless figure of the Bodhisattva Maitreya. Well-made rings and beads. Inscribed potsherds and a seal. Coins of the rulers of Mathura, the Yodhyas, and imitation coins of the Kushana king Vasudev. Early 6th century early 3rd century BCE pottery northern black polished ware, NBPW, coarse grey ware, unslipped red ware. Houses of mud bricks and kilburnt bricks, 17.5 x 10 x 2.7 inches. Brick-lined drains. Terracotta ring. Wells. Copper objects. Iron arrowhead, chisel and sickle. Punch-marked and uninscribed cast coins. Human and animal figurines, many of elephants, made of terracotta. Beads of etched carnelian and crystalline quartz. Rings made of copper, chalcedony, gold, and horn. c. 1100 to 800 BCE pottery painted grey ware, PGW, black slipped ware, and ordinary red and red slipped ware. House walls of mud, mud brick, reed, and mud plaster, 1 fragmentary burnt brick. Copper artifacts. Iron slag in the uppermost levels. Chert and jasper weights. Glass bangles. Terracotta objects including animal figurines. Bone needles. Charred grains of rice. Bones of horse, pig, cattle, etc. Pre-1200 BCE pottery fragments of ochre-colored pottery, OCP. No structures found, maybe because a very limited area was excavated. Habitation seems to have been sporadic. Note the mound of Hastinopura in Meerut district, Uttar Pradesh, was excavated in 1950–52, Silal, 1954–55. Its cultural sequence extended over an enormously long stretch of time, with 4 breaks in occupation. The earliest settlement belonged to the period before c. 1200 BCE and the latest level to the early 15th century CE. This table gives a brief synopsis of some of the main features of the various levels known as periods I, V. Read the table from bottom to top, starting from the lowest and earliest level, period I. Note the range of evidence and the remarkable snapshot it gives of the life of people who lived at this site over the centuries. The cultural sequence at Hastinopura is a very important reference point for other sites in the Upper Ganga Valley. Scientific techniques in archaeology. Archaeologists increasingly rely on various scientific techniques in order to obtain precise information about the lives of past communities. These are especially useful in dating archaeological material. Many dating methods are based directly or indirectly on the principle of radioactive decay. Carbon-14 or radiocarbon dating is the best known of these, but others include thermoluminescence, potassium-argon, electron spin resonance, uranium series, and fission track dating. The word archaeometry refers to a range of scientific techniques and analyses involving the use of measurement to analyze ancient objects or materials. The chemical analysis of pottery and metal artifacts can give clues about how they were produced. A comparison of the chemical composition of metal artifacts and ores can help identify the source of ores. Chemical analysis of soil can be used to determine the degree of human presence and activity at a site. For instance, the decomposition of animal excreta increases the nitrogen content of the soil. At the Chalcolithic site of Inamjiaon in Maharashtra, the soil in the courtyards had higher nitrogen content than that inside the house. This shows that people tied their animals in their courtyards. Paleontology is the study of the remains of dead organisms over enormous spans of time. Within this discipline, molecular biology and DNA studies have been used to understand hominid evolution, to answer questions about what ancient people looked like, and to plot patterns of migration. Bones provide a great deal of information. The distribution of faunal remains, animal bones, at a site can indicate which areas were used for butchering, cooking, eating, bone tool making, and refuse dumping. Faunal analysis gives information about the animals people hunted and domesticated, the age of animals at death, and the diseases that afflicted them. The bones of wild and domesticated species can usually be differentiated. The joints of animals used for agriculture or draft purposes get fused and can be identified. Faunal remains can lead to inferences about aspects of environment such as climate, vegetation, and the season during which a site was occupied. Sometimes, bones reveal contacts between communities. For instance, the identification of marine fish bones and shells at Inamjiaon at least 200 kilometers from the sea shows that its inhabitants had contacts with coastal communities. The dental structure of humans is connected to subsistence patterns and methods of food preparation. Trace element analysis of human bones and scanning electron microscopic (SEM) analysis of tooth enamel can help identify the kind of food people ate and whether they suffered from nutritional deficiencies. Diseases such as arthritis and tuberculosis leave their mark on bones. Paleopathology is the study of diseases ancient people suffered from by analyzing their bones. Human bones are also examined to make inferences about population size, density, mortality, fertility, and life expectancy. Since food and nutrition are related to social standing, assessing the nutritional inputs in the bones of men and women at a site can indicate whether there were marked status differences between groups of people or between men and women. Of course, all the scientific techniques mentioned here require specialized laboratories, expensive equipment, and skilled specialists. Radiocarbon dating. Discovered by an American chemist named Willard Libby in 1949, radiocarbon dating is today a very widely used dating method in archaeology. The atmosphere contains a fixed ratio of carbon-12, C12, ordinary carbon, and carbon-14, C14, a radioactive isotope of carbon. The latter is formed due to the influence of cosmic radiation on nitrogen in the atmosphere. Plants absorb C14 in the atmosphere through their intake of carbon dioxide during the process of photosynthesis. C14 passes into animals as they feed off plants or other animals. The intake of C14 stops when the plant or animal dies, after which the C14 in the physical structure of the organism begins to disintegrate at the rate of 1/2 every 5,730 years. This is known as the half-life of C14. By measuring the amount of C14 remaining in the organism, scientists can figure out when it died, i.e., how old it is. The radiocarbon method can be used to date various organic materials such as wood, charcoal, bone, and shell. Like all other scientific dating methods, the C14 method provides approximate, not exact dates, and a standard error margin, known as the standard deviation, is recognized. Radiocarbon dates are accompanied by a +/- factor. Take the following date, 2500 plus or minus 100 BP. This means a date range between 2600 and 2400 BP. BP stands for before present, and the year 1950, which was about the time the radiocarbon method of dating was introduced, is taken as the baseline, i.e., year 1. Archaeologists sometimes resort to multiple dates from the same sample in order to arrive at mean dates with a smaller standard deviation. Sometimes radiocarbon dates can be way off the mark. This could be because the sample has got contaminated, or due to some procedural error. Scientists have known for some time that the amount of radiocarbon produced in the atmosphere has not been constant over time. They have also noticed a discrepancy between the more accurate dates produced by tree ring dating and those arrived at by the radiocarbon method. Therefore, it is clear that some calibrations, i.e., corrections, have to be made while converting radiocarbon dates to calendar dates, i.e., BCE and CE dates. In view of the fact that there is still some debate regarding calibration procedures, some archaeologists prefer to publish uncalibrated dates. However, certain calibration tables have been more or less accepted by many scholars. Radiocarbon dates have certainly made a dramatic difference to our understanding of the chronology of ancient cultures. But why is it that radiocarbon dates for cultures given in different books are not always the same? This could be because some dates are calibrated, while others are uncalibrated. Another reason is that there is an element of interpretation and judgment involved even in the use of radiocarbon dates. When there is a string of radiocarbon dates for a site, which one is to be highlighted? Since radiocarbon dates give us a date bracket, which end of the bracket should be emphasized? Sometimes, instead of giving a whole string of radiocarbon dates with the standard deviation, archaeologists calculate the mean date and give that as a single radiocarbon date. There are thus choices to be made in the use of radiocarbon dates. How an archaeologist interprets and presents them depends on his/her larger understanding of the relative chronology of cultures. Environments are not just backdrops to human activity, they are an important part of human experience. The relationship between people and their environmental landscape not only forms an important part of what people do but also of how they think about the world and their place in it. An understanding of the natural environment in which people lived is therefore an important aspect of prehistory, proto-history, and history. Archaeologists are increasingly becoming aware of the importance of the interactive relationship between environment and people. Environmental archaeology, which aims at understanding how societies adapted to their environment and how they used environmental resources, involves the collaboration of scientists and archaeologists. Paleobotanical studies include the analysis of pollen and other minute plant remains, seeds, charcoal, sediments, and geological strata. Interpreting archaeological evidence. Interpretation is as crucial in archaeology as in using literary sources. It is involved at all levels, from the seemingly simple stage of classifying artifacts to the framing of historical hypotheses. Just as it is possible to identify trends in history writing, similarly, there have been several changes in approach and method within the discipline of archaeology. For example, in the 1960s, the traditional cultural history perspectives were challenged by the emergence of what came to be known as New Archaeology and a school known as processualism. Closely allied with anthropology, this school tried to understand cultures and cultural processes holistically, especially in relation to ecology, human adaptation, and the interaction of different kinds of variables. It advocated a problem-oriented approach, emphasizing the importance of explanation, generalization, and theory building. The post-processual school of archaeology, which emerged subsequently, challenged many of the assumptions, methods, and goals of processualism. Post-processualists question the possibility of objective knowledge about the past. Their understanding of material culture is also more complex. They point out that material culture can be used by social groups not only to reflect but also to disguise existing social relations. Archaeology usually provides an anonymous history, one that sheds light on cultural processes rather than events. It is the only source for prehistory, the longest part of the human past, during which many major discoveries and developments took place. It is also the only source for those parts of the past covered by non-deciphered written records, and continues to provide valuable information even after the beginning of the historical period. Unfortunately, once literary sources become available, historians tend to use archaeology as a secondary, corroborative source. One of the current challenges for early Indian history is to adequately incorporate archaeological evidence into the larger historical narratives. Archaeology often tells us about aspects of everyday life that are not revealed or emphasized in texts. It provides information on the history of human settlements and can give very specific details about modes of subsistence the food people procured in order to live, and how they obtained it. It offers details about the crops people grew, the agricultural implements they used, and the animals they hunted and tamed. It is an excellent source of information on various aspects of the history of technology, raw materials, their sources, the methods used to make artifacts of various kinds. Archaeology also helps reconstruct routes and networks of exchange, trade, and interaction between communities. Cognitive archaeology, which deals with ways of thinking, beliefs, and religion, is a fast-developing area within archaeology. Although a large number of religious texts are available for ancient and early medieval India, an exclusively text-based view of religion will not tell us everything we want to know about religious practice. The material evidence of ancient religions can make a major contribution in this area. There are many problems involved in translating archaeological cultures into history. An archaeological culture need not necessarily correspond to a linguistic group, political unit, or a social group such as a lineage, clan, or tribe. One of the most important questions is how to explain changes in material culture, especially pottery traditions. This is an issue that has not yet been adequately addressed or understood in the context of ancient India. Ethnoarchaeology. Ethnography is the study of living cultures and communities. Ethnoarchaeology studies the behavior and practices of living communities in order to interpret the archaeological evidence related to communities of the past. The Indian subcontinent is an area where many traditional features and methods survive, for instance in agriculture, animal husbandry, house building, the clothes people wear and the food they eat. Modern craftspersons are an important guide for understanding the ways in which ancient craftspersons made things. Technology involves much more than the techniques used for making artifacts. It is necessary to explore the social organization of craftspersons, the customs and beliefs that material objects were part of, how goods were marketed, the relationship between craftspersons and traders, and between craftspersons and customers. Ethnoarchaeology helps answer these sorts of questions as well. For instance, a tradition of carnelian bead manufacturing exists in Khambhat, in Gujarat, today. Studying modern bead making in this region gives valuable clues about the way in which the Harappan beads may have been made and the possible social organization of the bead makers. Ethnoarchaeology can contribute towards filling the silences and gaps in history. For instance, it has helped archaeologists make inferences about women's role in subsistence and craft-related activities in early times. Studies of modern communities of hunter-gatherers and shifting cultivators can help understand the life ways of people who followed similar subsistence strategies in the past. Such studies have pointed out that tribal communities were never completely isolated, and they have also highlighted the important link between the ways in which people obtain their food and their identity as a community. Of course, ethnoarchaeological evidence must be used cautiously, and it should be seen as suggesting possible and not necessarily conclusive ways of interpreting the archaeological data, always keeping in mind the differences between the present and past contexts. The social and cultural aspects of technology. Gundiali and Ladai are two pottery manufacturing villages in Kutch, Gujarat. Archaeology's case study explores the social and cultural aspects of technology and raises several important points that archaeologists and historians need to keep in mind when interpreting ancient pottery traditions. 1. Pots of different shapes, sizes, and forms are found in both villages. The form of vessels is connected to their specific function. For example, the mouth of a vessel used for storing dry material like grain and flour is wide so that it is easy to put a hand into it. Vessels used to carry water into fields have small mouths to minimize spillage. Cooking vessels have wide mouths to allow stirring and enlarged, thick rims so that they can be handled when hot. Vessels used for eating are open and shallow, with rim bases that give them stability. The connection between the form and function of pots can help archaeologists interpret the function of the pots they find at sites. 2. The potters of Untitled and Literary produce rather different vessels. This is because Untitled is dominated by farmers, laborers, and the service class, while Literary is dominated by farmers and herders. These groups have different lifestyles and needs and they use different kinds of pots. It is clear that potters make the sorts of pots their clients want, and consumer demand for pottery is shaped by occupation, family, and community identity, food habits, and ritual practices. Inferences about patterns of social and economic organization can be made on the basis of the range of pots found at a site. 3. The potters of Untitled and Literary are reluctant to experiment or change the forms and designs of the vessels they make. Pots change when there are significant socio-economic changes. For instance, the shapes of some of the traditional vessels have been modified to suit urban kitchens, although the decoration remains the same. This is relevant to understanding general patterns of continuity and change in ancient ceramic traditions. Protecting sites. The processes of rural and urban expansion pose constant threats to archaeological sites and their protection is crucial to the protection of the cultural heritage. Salvage archaeology aims at identifying endangered sites and saving them from destruction. Many decades ago, the site of Nagarjunakanda in the Guntur district of Andhra Pradesh was submerged in water when the Nagarjunasagar Dam was built across the Krishna. Before this happened, between 1954 and 1960, officers of the Archaeological Survey of India thoroughly explored, excavated, and documented the valley. The next step was a massive salvage operation. 9 of the most important structures were transplanted and rebuilt on top of the Nagarjunakanda hill and on the banks of the reservoir. Replicas of 14 other structures were made. Apart from such spectacular sites and huge salvage projects, there are thousands of smaller sites all over the subcontinent that need to be noticed, documented, and cared for. Protecting the archaeological heritage is not just the responsibility of the Archaeological Survey or the government. It is essential for ordinary people to realize the importance of protecting and cherishing these fragile links to the past. Epigraphy, the study of inscriptions. Ancient and early medieval scripts. Inscriptions and coins come under the general umbrella of archaeology and archaeological sources, but they are subjects of specialized study in their own right. The study of inscriptions is known as epigraphy. An inscription is any writing that is engraved on something: stone, wood, metal, ivory plaques, bronze statues, bricks, clay, shells, pottery, etc. Epigraphy includes deciphering the text of inscriptions and analyzing the information they contain. It also includes paleography, the study of ancient writing. As mentioned earlier, the oldest inscriptions in the Indian subcontinent are in the yet undeciphered Harappan script. The oldest deciphered inscriptions belong to the late 4th century BCE, and are in Brahmi and Kharosthi, sometimes spelled Kharosthi. These include those of the Maurya Emperor Ashoka, which are in a number of different languages and scripts, but mostly in the Prakrit language and Brahmi script. As there are no obvious links between the Harappan script and Brahmi or Kharosthi, what happened to writing in between remains a mystery. There is no direct mention of writing in Vedic literature, but references to poetic meters, grammatical and phonetic terms, very large numbers, and complex arithmetical calculations in later Vedic texts are taken by some historians to indicate the possibility that writing may have been known at the time. The first definite literary references to writing and written documents occur in the Buddhist Pali texts, especially the Jatakas and the Vinaya Pitaka. Panini's Ashtadhyayi refers to the word lipi, script. The Brahmi of Ashoka's inscriptions seems a fairly developed script, and it must have had a prior history of at least a few centuries. Recently, Important direct evidence that Brahma existed in pre-Maurya times has come from Anuradhapura in Sri Lanka, where excavations unearthed potsherds with short inscriptions, probably names of people, that can be dated to at least the early 4th century BCE. There are three main types of scripts. In a logographic script, written symbols stand for a word, in a syllabic script for a syllable, and in an alphabetic script for a single phonetic sound. In the strict sense of the term, in an alphabet, the vowels should have a separate and fully independent status equal to that of consonants. Both the Brahmi and Kharoshtha scripts stand midway between alphabetic and syllabic scripts, and can be described as semi-syllabic or semi-alphabetic. Kharoshtha's core area lay in the northwest in and around the Indus, Swat, and Kabul river valleys, the land known as Gandhara in ancient times. Ashoka's Shahbazgari and Mansura inscriptions are in this script. Kharoshtha was later used in North India under the Indo-Greek, Indo-Parthian, and Kushana kings, and was also used in certain records outside the Gandhara area, including in parts of Central Asia. Written from right to left, Kharoshtha seems to have been derived from the North Semitic Aramaic script. The origins of Brahmi, a script written from left to right, are not as clear. Some scholars have suggested an indigenous origin, others an Aramaic origin. A problem in accepting the latter theory is that the direction of writing and the forms of the letters in Brahmi and Kharoshtha are different, so it is unlikely that they were derived from the same script. Kharoshtha declined and died out in about the 3rd century CE. Brahmi, on the other hand, became the parent of all the indigenous scripts of South Asia, and also of those used in parts of Central and Southeast Asia. The different stages of the Brahmi script are often labeled on the basis of dynasties, example Ashokan Brahmi, Kushana Brahmi, and Gupta Brahmi. The epigraphist D.C. Sarkar identified 3 stages of development in the history of this script in northern India: early Brahmi, 3rd to 1st centuries BCE, middle Brahmi, 1st century BCE, 3 RD century CE, and late Brahmi, 4th to 6th centuries CE. In the late 6th century, Gupta Brahmi evolved into a script known as Siddhamatrika or Kudala, which had sharp angles at the lower right-hand corner of each letter. Regional differences became sharper after this point of time. The modern North Indian scripts gradually emerged out of Siddhamatrika. Nagari or Devanagari was standardized by about 1000 CE, and an Eastern script, known as Proto-Bengali or Gaudy, took shape between the 10th and 14th centuries. From here, it was a short step to the emergence of the Bengali, Assamese, Oriya, and Maithili scripts in the 14th to 15th centuries. This is also the time when the Sharda script emerged in Kashmir and adjoining areas. The earliest inscriptions in the Tamil language, with some Prakrit elements, are engraved in rock shelters and caves, mostly in Tamil Nadu, especially in the area near Madurai. They are in a script known as Tamil, Brahmi, an adaptation of Brahmi for writing the Tamil language. Iravatham Mahadevan, 2003, has identified 2 phases in the evolution of the Tamil, Brahmi script: early Tamil Brahmi, c. 2nd century BCE, 1 St century CE, and late Tamil, Brahmi, 2nd to 4th centuries CE. 3 southern scripts emerged in the early medieval period: Grantha, Tamil, and Vatluta. The first of these was used for writing Sanskrit, the second and third for writing Tamil. These 3 scripts may have emerged out of southern varieties of Brahmi, or they may have emerged from some other earlier southern scripts. The Tamil script first appeared in the Pallava territory in the 7th century CE. Something similar to the modern Telugu and Kannada scripts took shape in the 14th to 15th centuries, while the Malayalam script developed out of Grantha at about the same time. Ancient Indian inscriptions include a few biscript documents, in which the text is given in the same language written in 2 different scripts. Most of the instances come from the northwest and consist of short biscript Brahmi, Kharoshtha inscriptions. The longer records include an 8th century Patadakal pillar inscription of the Chalukya king Kirtivarman II. The language is Sanskrit. The text is written both in the North Indian Siddhamatrika script and in the local southern Proto-Telugu, Kannada script. Languages of ancient and early medieval inscriptions. The earliest Brahmi inscriptions, including those of Ashoka, are in dialects of Prakrit, also known as Middle Indo-Aryan. Between the 1st and 4th centuries CE, many inscriptions were written in a mixture of Sanskrit and Prakrit. The first pure Sanskrit inscriptions appeared in the 1st century BCE. The first long Sanskrit inscription is the Junagadh rock inscription of the western Kshatrapa king Rudradman. By about the end of the 3rd century CE, Sanskrit had gradually replaced Prakrit as the language of inscriptions in northern India. Deciphered and undeciphered scripts. The story of the decipherment of Inciant scripts is an exciting one. Ashokan Brahmi was deciphered as a result of the slow, painstaking efforts of a number of administrator scholars working in India as employees of the East India Company. They included Charles Wilkins, Captain A. Troyer, W. H. Mill, J. Stevenson, and James Prinsep. These scholars tried to read early medieval Brahmi inscriptions and then worked at deciphering the older Brahmi letters. The NAL step in the decipherment of the 3rd century BCE Maurya Brahmi was made by Prinsep in 1837. Even though Prinsep managed to read these inscriptions, he had no idea about the identity of the king Payadasi mentioned therein. The answer came soon enough, when George Turneur, an officer of the Ceylon civil service, identified the king as Ashoka on the basis of references in the Pali Chronicle, the Dype of Amsa. Prinsep also played a role in the decipherment of Kharosthi, along with other scholars such as Christian Lasson, Charles Masson, Alexander Cunningham, and E. Norris. The decipherment of Kharosthi was easier because of the availability of biscript coins in Greek and Kharosthi issued by the Indo-Greek kings. Apart from the Harappan script, there are some other scripts that are still undeciphered or difficult to read. These include an elaborate, calligraphic variation of Brahmi known as ornate or ornamental Brahmi, found on short inscriptions in various parts of the country. Another stylized, ornate form of the Brahmi script, referred to by scholars as Shankha Lipi, because its characters look like Shankhas, i.e., conch shells, is found in inscriptions of the 4th to 8th centuries CE in various parts of India except the far south. Both ornate Brahmi and Shankha seem to have been used mainly for names and signatures. There is a script similar to Brahmi on terracotta seals at sites such as Chandrakitagar and Tamluk in eastern India. An undeciphered script similar in some ways to Kharosthi has been found in Afghanistan. Sars Salomon, 1998. In the Deccan and South India, Sanskrit inscriptions appeared along with Prakrit ones in the late 3rd/early 4th century CE, for instance at Nagarjunakanda in Andhra Pradesh. The Sanskrit element gradually increased. In the transitional phase of the 4th and 5th centuries, there were bilingual Sanskrit, Prakrit inscriptions, as well as those in a mixture of the two languages. Thereafter, Prakrit fell into disuse. Between the 4th and 6th centuries, Sanskrit emerged as the premier language of royal inscriptions all over India. Thereafter, it attained the status of a language associated with high culture, religious authority, and political power not only in the subcontinent but also in certain other areas such as Southeast Asia. However, in the post-Gupta period, there was also an important parallel trend towards the evolution of regional languages and scripts. Even Sanskrit inscriptions show the influence of local dialects in spellings and words of non-Sanskrit origin. In South India, inscriptions in the Old Tamil language, and the Tamil, Brahmi script, appeared in the 2nd century BCE and the early centuries CE. Tamil became an important language of South Indian inscriptions under the Pallava dynasty. There are examples of bilingual Tamil, Sanskrit Pallava inscriptions from the 7th century onwards. In these, the invocation, genealogical portion, and concluding verses are often in Sanskrit and the details of the grants in Tamil. Kings of the Chola and Pandya dynasties also issued Tamil and bilingual Sanskrit, Tamil inscriptions. Hundreds of donative Tamil inscriptions were inscribed on temple walls in various parts of South India in early medieval times. The earliest Kannada inscriptions belong to the late 6th/early 7th century CE. From this period onwards, there were many private donative records in Kannada, and this language was also used in some royal grants. There are some bilingual Sanskrit Kannada inscriptions and a 12th century inscription found at Kurgad, in Bellary district, Karnataka, is in 3 languages: Sanskrit, Prakrit, and Kannada. The late 6th century epigraphs of the early Telugu Chola kings mark the beginnings of Telugu as a language of inscriptions. Thereafter, there are many private donative records in this language. Malayalam inscriptions appeared in about the 15th century. There are also a few late inscriptions in Tulu, a Dravidian language which is similar in some ways to Kannada and is spoken in parts of Karnataka. As for inscriptions in the modern North Indian, New Indo-Aryan, Languages, Marathi and Oriya inscriptions can be identified from the 11th century. Inscriptions in dialects similar to what is referred to today as Hindi appear in Madhya Pradesh from the 13th century onwards, and Gujarati can be identified in epigraphs from the 15th century. Dating the inscriptions. Inscriptions are usually dated in regnal years or eras. The dates of eras are given in words, numerals, or both. The ancient Indian calendar system often had a combination of lunar as well as solar units. Inscriptions sometimes specify the month, lunar fortnight, Paksh, lunar day, Tithi, weekday, the civil day or solar day, and may give additional astronomical details. The specification of the year and day began in the 2nd century BCE. Some later inscriptions give the date in the form of chronograms. Instead of numbers, words standing for these numbers are used, e.g., Bhumi, the earth, equals 1, Kara, hand, equals 2, Loka, the worlds, equals 3, Veda equals 4, etc. These words are given in the reverse sequence of the numbers in the date, and are to be read backwards. For example, Karaveda Bhumi means the year 142. If an inscription is not dated, it can be assigned a rough date on paleographic grounds. Many different eras were used in ancient and early medieval India. To cite a few examples, the Vikrama era of 58 BCE, the Shaka era of 78 CE, the Kalashuraichedai era of 248 CE, and the Gupta era of 319 to 20 CE. The Kalam era of 824 CE was used in inscriptions of Kerala and adjoining parts of Tamil Nadu, while the Kalyakuvikrama era of 1076 was used in some inscriptions of Karnataka and adjoining areas. The eras marked important events, usually the accession of a king. Subordinate kings used the era of their overlord, and some eras continued to be used long after their founding dynasty had disappeared. While the initial year of most ancient and early medieval eras is known, uncertainty still surrounds a few. For instance, the suggested dates for the beginning of the Harsha era include 612, 619, and 648 CE. Similarly, the dates for the era of the Ganga kings of Orissa range from the 4th to the 9th century CE. How to convert ancient era dates into modern ones? How do you convert a date in an ancient era into BCE/CE dates of the common era, which is based on the Christian calendar? All that is required is a bit of simple arithmetic. For a date in an era that began in a BCE year, subtract the initial BCE year of that era from it. If the era began in a CE year, add the initial CE date. For example, year 179 of the Vikrama era, which began in 58 BCE, equals 179 to 58 equals 121. CE, year 179 of the Shaka era, which began in 78 CE, equals 179 plus 78 equals 257 CE. There can be a bit of variation in the conversion of ancient dates, depending on whether the months mentioned are solar or lunar months. The month is also relevant because the traditional Indian year did not begin in the same month as the Western year, which begins in January. Another point that can create some confusion is whether the year mentioned in the inscription is to be understood as expired or current. This is sometimes, but not always, indicated in the text. To give an example, when we celebrate a child's first birthday, going according to expired years, he has completed 1 year, but going by current years, he has begun his 2nd year of life. In spite of these kinds of issues, if an inscription is dated in a known era, it is possible to pin it down within a very narrow margin. The classification of inscriptions. Inscriptions can be classified in several different ways, for instance according to the surface they are engraved on, language, age, and geographical region. They can also be classified into official and private records, depending on whose behalf they were inscribed. Ashoka's edicts and royal land grants are examples of official records. Inscriptions recording grants made by private individuals or guilds to temples, or to Buddhist or Jaina establishments are examples of private records. Inscriptions can also be classified according to their content and purpose into types such as donative, dedicative, and commemorative inscriptions. For instance, the Lumbini pillar inscription of Ashoka is a royal commemorative inscription, recording a specific event, the visit of the king to the Buddha's birthplace. In many parts of India, there is evidence of an ancient practice of erecting memorials to dead people. Thousands of memorial stones are found all over the country, not always connected with burials. Some only have sculpted scenes, realistic or symbolic, others also have inscriptions. The most common memorial stones were erected in memory of dead heroes or women who committed sati. But there are other kinds as well. Stones were set up in honor of Jaina men and women who gave up their lives in the exemplary Jaina fashion of death by starvation. On the Konkan coast, many stones were erected in memory of sailors who lost their lives in sea battles. Some memorial stones were worshipped. Donative inscriptions in favor of religious establishments were inscribed on shrine walls, railings, and gateways. The excavation and donation of caves to ascetics was recorded in inscriptions in the caves. Donative inscriptions include records of the installation of religious images, often inscribed on the images themselves. Others record investments of money made by people, out of the interest of which lamps, flowers, incense, etc. were to be provided for the worship of the deity. Royal land grants are an important category of donative records. There are thousands of such inscriptions, some on stone, but mostly inscribed on one or more copper plates. Most of them record grants made by kings to brahmanas and religious establishments. The earliest stone inscriptions recording land grants with tax exemptions are Satavahana and Kshatrapa epigraphs found at Nashik. The mid-4th century Pallava and Shalankayana grants are the earliest surviving copper plate grants. One of the oldest copper plate grants from North India is the late 4th century CE Kalachala grant of King Ishvararada. Copper plate grants increased in number and frequency in the early medieval period. Royal inscriptions include Prashastis, panegyric. Most royal inscriptions, and some private ones too, usually begin with a Prashasti, but some inscriptions are entirely devoted to eulogizing their subject. Well-known examples are the Hathagumfa inscription of Karvela, a 1st century BCE/1 St century CE king of Kalinga in Orissa, and the Allahabad Prashasti of the 4th century Gupta emperor Samudragupta. Memorializing death in stone. Memorial stones and their inscriptions reflect the values and ideals that ancient communities associated with life and death. In the Andhra region, such stones are known as Chaya Stamhas. At Nagarjunakanda, there are memorial stones in memory of kings, queens, soldiers, chieftains, generals, holy people, and an artisan. At the base of a 12 feet high limestone pillar is an inscription recording the names of 29 royal women sisters, mothers, and queens of the Ikshvaka family, collectively mourning King Chantamala I. Above the inscription are 5 panels of relief carving, one on top of the other, depicting the dead king in different poses. In the first, lowest, scene, he appears as a plump figure distributing gifts during the performance of a religious ceremony. In the next one, he is riding an elephant. In the panel above this, he is surrounded by women, 3 seated on the floor, perhaps musicians, the 4th dancing. In the next scene, he is sitting on a throne, flanked by women, 2 of whom may represent his queens. The topmost panel depicts a building, possibly a palace or heaven. The Nagarjunakanda memorial pillar in honor of an artisan is naturally much simpler. It just gives the name of the artisan Malabhuta and states that he came from a place called Pavayada. Above the inscription is a narrow-necked vase, which may have been the emblem of the guild to which Malabhuta belonged. The largest concentration of memorial stones is in Karnataka. About 2,650 hero stones dated between the 5th and 13th centuries have been found here. Inscriptions on some of these give only a name, others offer details of the circumstances in which the person died. Hero stones usually commemorated male heroes, but 2 inscriptions from Siddanahalli and Kembala refer to the heroic death of a woman and of a queen who launched a cattle raid. An inscription from Shikarapur refers to a woman laying down her life to defend others. There are also some interesting memorials for pets. An inscription from Galarahatti is in memory of a hunting dog named Punisha who died after killing a wild boar, while another one from Atkur commemorates the death of a dog named Kali who died fighting a wild boar during a hunt. A 12th century inscription at Tumbur mourns the death of the pet Par Rod of a king of the Kadamba dynasty of Goa. The parrot was eaten by a cat in the palace, and the inscription tells us that the king was so filled with grief at this event that he killed himself. The tradition of memorial pillars lives on in certain parts of the country today. E.G. in Karnataka and among tribal communities of Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh. The Maurya and Mauryagan tribes of the Bastar region of Madhya Pradesh still erect memorials of stone and wood. Some are plain, others are beautifully carved or painted. These memorials are linked with beliefs and rituals related to death and afterlife, and are a very important part of the cultural life and identity of the people. Certain inscriptions record the building of waterworks, wells, and charitable feeding houses by private individuals. A series of unique records of royal initiatives of this kind are inscribed on a granite rock at Junagadh, Girnar, in Gujarat. Apart from a set of Ashokan edicts, this rock bears two other important inscriptions. A 150 CE inscription of the Shaka ruler Rudradman records the beginning of the construction of a water reservoir known as Sudarshana Lake in the 4th century BCE during the time of the Maurya Emperor Chandragupta, its completion during the reign of Ashoka, and its repair in the 2nd century CE. A 5th century inscription on the same rock, of the time of the Gupta king Skandagupta, describes how the lake burst its banks due to excessive rains and was repaired after 2 years' work. What we have here is an amazing history of the building and repair of an ancient water reservoir over a period of about 1,000 years. There are other miscellaneous types of inscriptions: labels, graffiti left by pilgrims and travelers, religious formulae, and writing on seals. Certain inscriptions from Madhya Pradesh give a condensed summary of the basics of Sanskrit grammar. Footprint inscriptions are found in many parts of the country, accompanying a pair of engraved footprints of a holy man, king, or other noteworthy person. Inscriptions as a source of history. Compared with manuscripts of texts, inscriptions have the advantage of durability. They are usually contemporaneous to the events they speak of, and their information can be connected to a time and place. Changes and additions made to them can usually be detected without great difficulty. The text of inscriptions may be brief, but a large number of short inscriptions can often provide important historical information. Compared to literary sources, which tend to give a theoretical perspective, inscriptions often reflect what people were actually doing. And although epigraphs of different categories usually follow a standard format, some of them do have the ability to surprise. Inscriptions are a valuable source of information on political history. The geographical spread of a king's inscriptions is often taken as indicating the area under his political control. But the discovery of inscriptions depends on chance, and not all the inscriptions inscribed during a king's reign need necessarily be found. Furthermore, movable inscriptions are not always found in situ, i.e., in their original place. The earliest royal inscriptions do not contain much genealogical material, but later ones generally do. Their prashustis give details about the history of dynasties and the reigns of kings. Of course, there are problems. Royal inscriptions naturally tend to exaggerate the achievements of the ruling king. Sometimes, confusion is created when a genealogy mentions kings with the same name, or when different inscriptions contradict each other on particular details. Sometimes genealogies skip names. This kind of skipping occurs, for instance, in the case of Skandagupta and Ramagupta, who are ignored in Gupta genealogies because they did not come within the direct line of succession of later rulers. There are cases where inscriptions of different dynasties make conflicting claims. For instance, a Gurjara Pratihara inscription states that King Vatsraja conquered all of Karnataka. However, the contemporary Rashtrakuta king claims in his inscriptions to have defeated Vatsraja and to have ruled over the Karnataka area. Wherever possible, details of political events given in inscriptions have to be cross-checked. Inscriptions, especially those of the early medieval period, have been used as a major source of information on political structures and administrative and revenue systems. They can also shed light on the history of settlement patterns, agrarian relations, forms of labor and class and caste structures. Analyzing epigraphic evidence involves unraveling the technical vocabulary of inscriptions. For instance, the designations of officials, fiscal terms, and land measures, the meanings of which are not always clear. There are very few ancient records of secular land transactions and records of land disputes, but these take us straight to the heart of social and economic issues. For instance, an inscription of the time of the Chola king Rajaraja III, 1231 CE, states that farmers of a certain village found the burden of arbitrary levies in money and paddy and the demand of compulsory labor made on various pretexts by several agencies so unbearable that they could no longer carry on cultivation. A meeting of the Brahmana assembly and the leading men of the locality was held in the village temple. Decisions were taken, fixing the dues that farmers were to give to the Brahmanas and royal tax collectors, and the labor services that they were expected to perform. An ancient theatre, an ancient love story. The Sitabenga and Jogimara caves on Ramgarh Hill, in Chhattisgarh, can be reached through a natural tunnel known as Hathapal, 180 feet long and so high that an elephant can pass through it. Both caves have inscriptions in a Prakrit dialect, engraved in Brahmi letters of the 3rd century BCE. In front of the entrance of the Sitabenga cave is a row of rock-cut benches arranged in terraces in the shape of a crescent, with aisles. The 2-line inscription in the cave cannot be read clearly or fully. It seems to talk of venerable poets who kindled the heart of others with their poetry, and people tying garlands of jasmine flowers around their necks at the swing festival of the full moon, when there was much fun, frolic, and music. The inscriptions and the layout of the cave and the area around it suggest that this may have been an ancient theatre, a place where poets recited their poems and where plays were performed long ago. The Jogimara cave lies to the south of Sitabenga. Here, there is a 5-line inscription which can be translated thus: Sutanuka by name, a Devadasi. The excellent among young men, Devadana by name, the Rupadaksha, loved her. In later times, the word Devadasi referred to a temple woman, but its meaning in this early context is uncertain. Rupadaksha can be interpreted in different ways. It could mean someone skilled in sculpture, or a scribe, or an officer connected with coinage. But there are paintings on the roof of the cave, so maybe the word means painter or artist. However, there is another possible translation of the Jogimara inscription: Sutanuka by name, a Devadasi, made this resting place for girls, perhaps actresses who performed in the dramas enacted here. Devadana by name, skilled in painting, made the paintings in this cave. The Jogimara cave inscription can thus be interpreted in 2 very different ways. The first interpretation conveys raw emotion in its startling brevity, while the second one is more matter-of-fact. Inscriptions provide datable information on the history of religious sects, institutions, and practices. Donative records help identify the sources of patronage enjoyed by ancient religious establishments. They also give glimpses into sects and cults that were once important but did not leave any literature of their own, example the Ajivaka sect and the Yaksha and Naga cults. Inscriptions can help identify and date sculptures and structures, and thus throw light on the history of iconography, art, and architecture. They are also a rich source of information on historical geography. In fact, the location of several ancient Buddhist monastic sites such as Kapilavastu, identified with Piprawa in Busti district, UP, has been fixed on the basis of inscribed monastic seals. Inscriptions reflect the history of languages and literature, and a few refer to the performing arts. For instance, the 7th century Kuduma Yamalai inscription gives the musical notes used in 7 classical ragas. Inscriptions from Tamil Nadu refer to the performance of various kinds of dances. The pillars of the eastern and western gateways of the Natraja temple at Chidambaram have label inscriptions describing the dance poses of 108 sculpted figures carved on them, quoting verses from the Natya Shastra of Bharata. Inscriptions are material remains and have to be understood in relation to the larger contexts in which they are found. They are also texts, connected with prevailing structures of power, authority, and social status. Whether fragmentary or complete, whether consisting of one word or hundreds of lines, an inscription has to be read and analyzed carefully. Its contents can then be compared with those of other inscriptions and with information from other kinds of sources. Numismatics, the study of coins. In modern times, money functions as a medium of exchange, a store of value, a unit of accounts, and a medium of deferred payment. In its most general sense, money is any item that is accepted by a community for the exchange of goods or services or for the discharge of debt. Currency and coinage are more specific terms. Currency is a medium of exchange backed by an issuing authority, one that can be used to immediately discharge any kind of financial obligation. Coinage is metal currency. It has a definite size, shape, and weight standard, and bears the stamp of an issuing authority. The main message-bearing side of a coin is known as the obverse and the other side the reverse. In the world context, the earliest coins appear in Lydia in West Asia in c. 700 BCE and were made of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver. Numismatics or the study of coins includes the analysis of the material out of which coins were made, the identification of the sources of the metals, the classification and study of the form of coins on the basis of their fabric, size, shape, thickness, design, workmanship, metrology, weight, design, metallic composition, techniques of manufacture, and message content. Ancient coins are usually discovered by accident. A very small proportion finds its way into the hands of coin collectors or governments, the majority end up getting lost, melted down, or destroyed. Coins occur as stray individual finds or as part of coin hoards. Hoards are especially valuable for monetary history and consist of coins withdrawn from human custody, due to being buried underground for safety, or fire, floods, loss, etc., and found subsequently. Metrology, the measurement and arrangement of coins by weight, is an important aspect of numismatics. In the course of circulation, coins are subjected to wear and tear and their weight gradually decreases. This fact enables numismatists to arrange them in a chronological sequence and to distinguish between coins of a hoard that have been in circulation for greater and less periods of time. Various techniques are used for ascertaining the metal content of coins. One method is to carefully inspect their color and luster. There are other informal physical procedures such as testing for resonance by dropping the coin on a hard surface to produce a sound or testing its ductility by biting it. A water displacement test can be conducted to measure a coin's specific gravity. There are also several chemical testing procedures for ascertaining metal composition. These are more accurate but generally damage the coin. Non-destructive scientific techniques such as X-ray fluorescence, XRF, spectrometry, which are now being used to analyze the elemental composition of coins, provide quick and accurate results. Mint towns can be identified by noting sites where large numbers of coin molds have been found. An analysis of coin dies can help identify the number and sequence of issues, and estimates of the volume of coins produced by these dies can be made by extrapolation. A brief history of Indian coinage. Stone Age people had neither currency nor coinage and conducted exchange via barter. Chalcolithic cultures too conducted trade without the use of coins. The Harappans, for instance, had a very extensive trade network based on barter. The Rig Veda mentions words such as Nishka and Nishkagriva, gold ornaments, and Hiranyapinda, gold globules, but these cannot be understood as coins. Later Vedic texts use terms such as Nishka, Suvarna, Shatamana, and Pada. These may have been metal pieces of definite weight, not necessarily full-fledged coins. The earliest definite literary and archaeological evidence of coinage in the Indian subcontinent dates from the 6th to 5th centuries BCE in a context of the emergence of states, urbanization, and expanding trade. Buddhist texts and the Ashtadhyayi refer to words such as Kahapana/Karshapana, Nika/Nishka, Shatamana, Pada, Vimshatika, Trinshatika, and Suvana/Suvarna. The basic unit of Indian coin weight systems was a red and black seed of the gunja berry, Abras precatorius, known as the Raktika, Rati, or Rithi. In South India, the standard weight of coins was theoretically calculated on the basis of the relationship between two kinds of beans, the Manjati, Odinathera pavonina, and the Kalanjut, Cae salpinaya banduk. The advent of coinage did not mean the disappearance of barter. Both coexisted for a very long time. The oldest coins found in the subcontinent are punch-marked coins, made mostly of silver, some of copper. They are usually rectangular, sometimes square or round. The blanks for making these coins were generally cut from a metal sheet or made from flat-end metal globules. The symbol or symbols were then hammered on separately, using dies or punches. These coins are often irregular in shape, their corners sometimes snipped off to adjust their weight. Most of the silver punch-marked coins weighed 32 ratis or about 56 grains. Grain is a weight measure used for metals. 1 grain equals 64.79 milligrams. Punch-marked coins are found all over the subcontinent, and continued to circulate in many places till the early centuries CE, with a longer period of circulation in peninsular India. The punch-marked coins of northern India can be divided into 4 main series on the basis of their weight, the number and nature of punch marks, and their area of circulation. The Taxila Gandhara type of the northwest with a heavy weight standard and a single punch type, the Kosala type of the middle Ganga Valley, with a heavy weight standard and multiple punch marks, the Avanti type of western India, with a lightweight standard and single punch mark, and the Magadhan type with a lightweight standard and multiple punches. Michener, 1973. Changes in coinage patterns mirrored political changes. With the expansion of the Magadhan Empire, the Magadhan type of punch-marked coins came to gradually replace those of other states. Although these coins do not have any legends, i.e., anything written on them, it is likely that most of them were issued by states. In later times, there is evidence of city issues and guild issues, and it is possible that this practice also prevailed in the period of the punch-marked coins. Symbols on these coins include geometric designs, plants, animals, the sun, wheel, mountain, tree, including tree and railing, branches, and human figures. Some symbols may have had a religious or political importance, but their precise significance is not always certain. The coins often have primary and secondary punch marks. The latter are counter stamps or counter marks which were added on later, without heating the coins. Uninscribed cast coins made of copper or alloys of copper appeared soon after the punch-marked coins. They have been found in most parts of the subcontinent except the far south. Some types have a fairly wide distribution, while others, such as those found at Ayodhya and Kaushambi, which seem to have been issued in the late 3rd or early 2nd century BCE, have a more restricted range of circulation. These coins were made by melting metal and pouring it into clay or metal molds. Clay molds have in fact been found at many sites, and a bronze mold was found at Iran in central India. The discovery of punch-marked and uninscribed cast coins in the same archaeological level at some early historical sites indicates that they overlapped in time. Other early Indian coin types include uninscribed die-struck coins, mostly in copper, rarely in silver. The symbols, some similar to those on the punch-marked coins, were struck onto coin blanks with metal dies that were carefully carved with the required designs. The minting of such coins may have begun in about the 4th century BCE, and they have been found in large numbers at sites such as Taxila and Ujjain. The next stage in the history of Indian coinage is marked by the die-struck Indo-Greek coins of the 2nd/1 St century BCE. These are very well executed, usually round, a few are square or rectangular, and mostly in silver, a few are in copper, bilina silver, copper alloy, nickel, and lead. They bear the name and portrait of the issuing ruler on the obverse. Coins of Menander and Strato I show them slowly aging from teenagers to old men, indicating their long reigns. Coins issued jointly by kings reflect the practice of conjointment rule. The reverse of the coins usually had religious symbols. The Indo-Greeks issued bilingual and biscript coins, the name of the issuer appearing on the obverse in Greek and on the reverse in the Prakrit language, and usually in the Kharoshtha script, rarely in Brahmi. The coins of these kings also have certain symbols referred to as monograms by numismatists, the precise significance of which is not certain. Coins of the Shakas, Parthians, and Kshatrapas follow the basic features of Indo-Greek coinage, and include bilingual and biscript issues. The Kushanas, 1st to 4th centuries CE, were the first dynasty of the subcontinent to mint large quantities of gold coins. Their silver coins are rare. They also issued many copper coins of low denominational value, which indicates the increasing spread of the money economy. Kushana coins have the figure, name, and title of the king on the obverse. On the reverse are deities belonging to the Brahminical, Buddhist, Greek, Roman, and other pantheons. The legends are either entirely in Greek, or in some cases in Kharosthi on the reverse. A number of coin types ranging from the 3rd century BCE to the 4th century CE, referred to by numismatists as indigenous, tribal, Janapada, or local coins, form an important source of information on the history of the dynasties of northern and central India. These coins are mostly cast or die-struck in copper or bronze, but there are some silver coins and a few rare examples of ones in lead and podin, an alloy of copper, lead, tin, and dross. They include those issued by chieftains, kings, and non-monarchical states such as the Arjunayanas, Udahikas, Mallavas, and Yodhyas. There are also coins bearing the name of cities such as Tripuri, Ujjayini, Kaushambi, Vidisha, Arakina, Mahishmati, Madhyamika, Varanasi, and Taxila, presumably issued by the administration of these cities. Some coins with the word Nigama seem to represent coins issued by merchant guilds. Certain Taxila coins with the legend Punchanekame may have been issued jointly by 5 guilds. In the Deccan, The pre-Satavahana coinage was followed by the copper and silver coins of the Satavahana kings. Rulers of this dynasty also issued coins of small denominational value made of lead and potin. Most Satavahana coins were die-struck, but there are some cast coins, and a combination of techniques was also used. The legends were generally in the Prakrit language in Brahmi script. However, the portrait coins, mostly in silver, but also in lead, use a Dravidian language in Brahmi script. Punch-marked coins continued to circulate alongside the Satavahana issues. There was a greater demand for silver currency in the western Deccan, perhaps due to commercial reasons. The Kshatrapa ruler Nahapana introduced a silver currency in the Nashik area. Roman gold coins also flowed into peninsular India in large quantities in the early centuries CE and may have been used as a medium of exchange for large-scale transactions or as currency reserves and capital deposits. Locally made imitations of Roman gold coins have also been found. So, in the early centuries CE in the western Deccan, there was a coexistence of Satavahana, Kshatrapa, punch-marked, and Roman coins. Currencies of the western Deccan also flowed into the eastern Deccan. Some of the punch-marked coins found in various parts of South India have been identified as dynastic issues on the basis of their symbols. For example, coins found in a hoard at Badanakanur near Madurai had a double carp fish, the symbol of the Pandya kings. In recent years, there has been increasing evidence of dynastic issues, some with portraits, with legends of the Cholas, Cheras, and Pandyas. This evidence has come from private collections and as surface and stray finds, but not so far in stratified archaeological contexts. Coins with the legend Valyudi have been assigned to the Pandyas. Silver coins with the portrait of a Chera king and the legend Makatai have been found in the Krishna riverbed near Karur. There are also coins with the legends Kudavan Kotai and Kolapure along with the Chera symbols of the bow and arrow and the double fish and tiger. The imperial Gupta kings issued well-executed die-struck gold coins with metri. Kal legends in Sanskrit. Known as dinaras, these coins have been mostly found in North India. The obverse depicts the reigning king in various poses, usually martial ones, but there are interesting instances of coins of Samudragupta and Kumaragupta I showing them playing the veena, a stringed instrument. The reverse of the Gupta coins have religious symbols indicating the king's religious affiliations. There was a decline in the metallic purity of gold coins in the later part of Skandagupta's reign. The Guptas also issued silver coins, but their copper coins are rare. In the post-Satavahana period in the eastern Deccan, the Ikshvakus of the lower Krishna Valley, 3rd to 4th centuries, issued lead coins similar in fabric to the Satavahana ones. Some copper issues have been attributed to the Shailankayana dynasty, early 4th mid-5th centuries, and the Vishnukandins, mid-5th, mid-7th centuries. Coins of the Trakyatakas, 3rd to 4th centuries, circulated in the western Deccan and silver issues of the early Kalashuras, 6th century, in the Maharashtra area. The numismatic history of the early medieval period is a subject of continuing debate. Historians who describe this period as marked by a feudal order talk of a decline in coinage along with a decline in trade in urban centers, followed by a revival in the 11th century. This hypothesis can be questioned. There was certainly a decline in the aesthetic quality of coins, in the number of coin types, and in their message content. Many are devoid of names or titles, and are therefore difficult to associate with a particular king. However, as demonstrated by John S. Dial, 1990, there does not seem to have been a decline in the volume of coins in circulation. A number of base metal alloy coin series were issued by dynasties in early medieval times. In the Ganga Valley, Bilan coins circulated in the Gurjara Pratihara kingdom, while other coin types circulated in Rajputana and Gujarat. Copper coins were minted by the Arab governors of Sindh between the mid-8th to mid-9th centuries. In Kashmir, copper coins were supplemented by bills of exchange, hundikas, denominated in terms of coins or grain, and the use of cowries. During the 6th to 7th centuries, kings of Bengal such as Shashanka issued gold coins. No coin issues of the Pala and Sena dynasties have so far been identified. It has been suggested that the references to currency units in their inscriptions do not represent actual coins but theoretical units of value made up by a fixed number of objects such as cowries. However, A number of silver coins known as Harikila coins were circulating in Bengal between the 7th and 13th centuries, and these had corresponding local Eastern series, issued in the name of various localities. In the Western Deccan, some early medieval coin types have been tentatively identified with the Chalukyas of Badami. Although gold and silver coins found in the Andhra region have been attributed to the early Eastern Chalukyas, there seems to be a subsequent gap of about 3 centuries till the end of the 10th century, when there was a revival of gold and copper coinage under the later kings of this dynasty. The attribution of certain gold and silver coins to the Chalukyas of Kalyana, 8th to 12th centuries, and to the Kalashurai Rajputs remains uncertain. Coins issued by the Kadambas of Goa, 11th to 12th centuries, have been identified, and a few gold coins have been attributed to the Sheila Harris of the Western Deccan, 11th century. In the far south, coins with lion and bull motifs, some inscribed with titles, have been associated with the Pallavas. The tiger crest is the emblem on Chola coins. The seals of several Chola copper plate inscriptions show the tiger, fish, the Pandya emblem, and bow, the Chera emblem, indicating that the Cholas had achieved political supremacy over these two dynasties. The appearance of these three emblems on many gold, silver, and copper coins suggests that these were Chola issues. Gold coins found at Kavalayada Valley in the Nellary district of Andhra Pradesh have the motifs of the tiger, bow, and some indistinct marks. The obverse has the Tamil legend sung, which seems to be a short form of Sungandavar Teralina, abolisher of tolls, one of the titles of the Chola king Kuladunga. The legends on the reverse, either Kongchi or Any, may be short for Nellore, may indicate the names of mint towns. The last phase of Chola rule is only represented by copper coins. Coins, mostly copper ones of the early medieval Pandyas, have been found largely in Sri Lanka. A few bear names like Veerapandya or Sundarapandya. The problem is one of figuring out which of the several kings of these names they refer to. In many parts of early medieval India, cowries continued to be used as money along with coins. At Sohapur in Orissa, 25,000 cowries were found along with 27 Kalashurai coins. At Bondri village in Lucknow, 54 Pratihara coins were found along with 9,834 cowries. Cowries were probably used by people either for small-scale transactions or where coins of small denominational value were in short supply. The market value of cowries fluctuated, depending on demand and supply. Coins as a source of history. At first glance, coins may appear to carry little historical information, but they provide clues to several important historical processes. They are linked to monetary history, which includes an analysis of the production and circulation of coinage, the monetary values attached to coins, and the frequency and volume of issues. Monetary history is in turn an important aspect of the history of exchange and trade. At another level, legends on coins give information on the history of languages and scripts. The wide distribution of Kushana coins indicates the flourishing trade of the period. The ship on certain Satavahana coins reflects the importance of maritime trade in the Deccan during this period. Roman coins found in various parts of India provide information on Indo-Roman trade. The few coin series issued by guilds indicate the importance of these institutions. Coins are often taken to indicate levels of economic prosperity, or the lack of it, or the financial condition of ancient states. Historians frequently interpret the debasement of coins as an indication of a financial crisis in the state or more general economic decline, for instance, in the time of the later Guptas. However, in a situation where the supply of precious metals is restricted or reduced, alloying or debasement can be a response to an increase in the demand for coins created by an increase in the volume of economic transactions. Dial, 1990. As already indicated, the numismatic record of early medieval India is closely tied up with broader debates about the nature of political, social, and economic structures of the time. Dates appear rarely on early Indian coins. Exceptions are Western Kshatrapa coins which give dates in the Shaka era and some Gupta silver coins which give the regnal years of kings. Whether dated or undated, coins discovered in archaeological excavations often help date the layers. An example is the site of Sunk near Mathura, where the excavated levels were divided into 8 periods on the basis of coin finds. As important royal message-bearing media, coins form a vital source of political history. The area of circulation of dynastic issues is often used to estimate the extent and frontiers of empires. However, caution has to be exercised, because coins made of precious metals had an intrinsic value and often circulated beyond the borders of the state issuing them. They also sometimes continued to circulate for some time after a dynasty faded from power. Several different currency systems could prevail in an area, and it is necessary to visualize multiple overlapping and intersecting spheres of coin circulation. Numismatic evidence is an especially important source for the political history of India between c. 200 BCE and 300 CE. Most of the Indo-Greek kings are known almost entirely from their coins. Coins also offer information on the Parthians, Shakas, Kshatripas, Kushanas, and Satavahanas. The coins of over 25 kings with names ending in the suffix Mitra have been found in the area from East Punjab to the borders of Bihar. Coins found in various parts of north and central India, Vidisha, Iran, Pawaya, Mathura, etc., mention kings whose names end in the suffix Naga, about whom little is known from other sources. Coins also offer information on ancient political systems. The term Gana on coins of the Yodhiyas and Mallavas points to their non-monarchical polity. City coins are suggestive of the importance and possible autonomy of certain city administrations. Sometimes, numismatic evidence offers more than just the names of kings and provides biographical details. For instance, the only specific detail we know about the life of the Gupta king Chandragupta is that he married a Lichchavi princess, and this detail comes from coins commemorating the marriage. Coins have helped prove that a Gupta king named Ramagupta ruled between Samudragupta and Chandragupta II. The performance of the Ashvamedha sacrifice by Samudragupta and Kumaragupta I is recorded on coins. The archer and battle axe coin types of Samudragupta predictably advertise his physical prowess, while the lyrist type, which shows him playing the veena, represents a completely different aspect of his personality. Counterstruck coins of the Kshatripas and Satavahanas. In 1906, a spectacular discovery was made in Jagaltembai, a small village on the outskirts of Nashik in Maharashtra. It was a hoard of 13,250 silver coins of Nahapana, a king belonging to the Kesha Harada house of the Kshatripa rulers, who established his base in the Gujarat area in about the 2nd century CE. As many as 9,270 of these coins had marks of counter-striking by Gautamiputra Satakarni, a king of the Satavahana dynasty, which was a major political force in the Deccan in the early centuries CE. Counter-striking is the phenomenon of coins issued by one authority being restruck by another authority. Numismatists refer to the original strike of counter-struck coins as the undertype and the new one as the overtype. When properly done, restriking can completely erase the original undertype. However, in many cases, if the restriking is not forceful enough, some of the motifs of the undertype can be seen along with the overtype. The authority that originally struck the coin must in all cases have been earlier than or contemporary to the one responsible for the overtype. Shailendra Bundare describes how counter-striking can provide important historical information about the relative chronology and political history of the Kshatripa and Satavahana rulers. The design of Nahapana's silver coins were based on the Indo-Greek silver drams. The obverse bore his portrait along with a legend in a corrupt form of the Greek script. On the reverse was his dynastic emblem, a thunderbolt and arrow, along with inscriptions in the Brahma and Kharoshtha scripts. All the coin legends were in the Prakrit language and proclaimed Nahapana as the Kshatripa of the Keshaharada house. Gautamiputra Satakarni counterstruck Nahapana's coins with his own symbols. These included an arched hill surrounded by a Prakrit legend giving his name on the obverse. On the reverse was his dynastic emblem, 4 circles joined by a cross, with a small crescent on top of one of the circles. Numismatists call this the Ujjayi Jain symbol. Another interesting example of counter-striking comes from certain coins issued by Nahapana with counter-strikes by an otherwise unknown Satavahana king named Shiva Satakarni. There are also coins issued by Shiva Satakarni, counter-struck by Nahapana. The fact that these two rulers were counter-striking each other's coins indicates that they must have been contemporaries. Counter-striking is generally interpreted as a graphic indication of political rivalry and contest, showing which king had the upper hand over the other at a particular point of time. The rivalry between the Keshaharada and Satavahana rulers is well known from other sources, including inscriptions. However, Bundare points out that counter-striking was a way of efficiently and swiftly providing an acceptable exchange medium when The political authority in an area had changed, announcing the change to money users. Continuity was an important factor in ensuring that people had faith in the authenticity and value of money, and a sudden change in coin types could create a situation of circulatory shock, uncertainty and mistrust among coin users. Therefore, when a new political authority took over, it often tried to ensure that its coins did not look too different from those of its predecessors. This is why when Nahapana took over the Nashik area, his coins retained the elephant in a modified form of the tree and railing motifs of the earlier Satavahana coins that were in circulation here. Similarly, his Junnar coins retained the lion emblem of earlier coins. At the same time, while trying to maintain continuity, Nahapana made his point on the reverse of the new coins issued from Nashik and Junnar, where the Satavahana, Ajay Jain symbol, was replaced by his own thunderbolt and arrow emblem. The depiction of deities on coins provides information about the personal religious preferences of kings, royal religious policy, and the history of religious cults. For instance, representations of Balrama and Krishna appear on 2nd century BCE coins of the Indo-Greek king Agadhokles at Ai-Khanum, in Afghanistan, indicating the popularity and importance of the cults of these gods in this region. The depiction of a great variety of figures from Indian, Iranian, and Greco-Roman religious traditions on the coins of the Kushana kings is generally interpreted as a reflection of their eclectic religious views. But it can equally be read as evidence of the many religious cults prevailing in their empire and the wide range of religious symbols through which the Kushanas chose to legitimize their political power. Conclusions. A meticulous and skillful analysis of the sources is the foundation of history. The various literary and archaeological sources for ancient and early medieval India have their own specific potential as well as limitations, which have to be taken into account by the historian. Interpretation is integral to analyzing the evidence from ancient texts, archaeological sites, inscriptions, and coins. Wherever several sources are available, their evidence has to be correlated. The correlation of evidence from texts and archaeology is especially important for a more comprehensive and inclusive history of ancient and early medieval India. However, as will become evident in later chapters, given the inherent differences in the nature of literary and archaeological data, it is not always easy to integrate them into a smooth and seamless narrative.